Hey guys, it's Mrs. Olenichek, and today we're going to talk about the immune system. If you've ever seen the movie Osmosis Jones is actually a white blood cell, and his job, just like the job of your immune system, is to protect your body against foreign invaders. Another word for those foreign invaders are pathogens. So a pathogen is just anything that makes you sick or that your body thinks is going to make you sick. Generally, it's something that your immune system will recognize as non-self, so it doesn't have the proper markers on the cell surface, and so your immune system recognizes it as a foreign entity. So a pathogen is something that makes you sick or causes disease. Bacteria are considered pathogens if they are going to make you sick. Not all bacteria are pathogenic. Some viruses, there are fungus or fungi that can make you sick, as well as some protozoa. So things like malaria are actually caused by a small single-celled organism. And so those are just some examples of different pathogens. So your body's first line of defense is going to be non-specific. It's going to defend against as many invaders as it can. And this includes things like your skin. So your skin protects your inside from the outside. You have thousands of bacteria that live on your skin, and it prevents them from getting into your tissues, getting into your bloodstream. Your mucous membranes, too, line your inner passages and try to prevent pathogens from getting into your tissues. So one of the reasons why when you're sick you get a runny nose is because you're trying to clean out all of those pathogens that may be in your nasal passages. Tears are also part of this defense, and they contain enzymes that are antibacterial, will kill bacteria. And so they help to protect your eyes because that's another area that's susceptible to infection. So if something gets past the first line of defense, so if you cut your skin or something gets by those membranes for whatever reason, then you rely on your second line of defense. And this is another non-specific defense. One thing that can occur here is something called the inflammatory response. And so if you've ever cut yourself and looked at the cut later, or you've gotten a splinter, you may see some swelling or redness. When your cells are damaged, they're actually going to release chemical messages that attract white blood cells and platelets. You're also going to increase in temperature, and that's to try to kill some of those bacteria. So one of the reasons you get a fever is because if the temperature gets too high, you limit the bacteria's ability to reproduce. Now, some of those white blood cells that get attracted are things like phagocytes. These are going to be, macrophages are an example, and this is an electron micrograph kind of colored. You can see this is the macrophage here, and it's sending out tendrils and grabbing these bacteria in green, and it will pull them in. It's kind of like a blob, and it will engulf or eat them. And so they kind of go around your body looking for foreign invaders, and they will eat those unknown cells. And then later on, they're going to present those to your helper B cells. Another type of white blood cell involved in this non-specific second line of defense are going to be things called natural killer cells. And your natural killer cells are actually going to go around and poke holes in infected body cells. So it sounds terrible that they would go and kill an infected cell, but many of these viruses or bacteria are going to reproduce inside of that cell, and then when the cell dies anyway, it will release all of those now mature viruses or new viruses out, and more cells are going to be infected. So oftentimes cells will signal that they're sick and call over white blood cells and kind of take one for the team, and the natural killer cell's job is to kill those infected, damaged cells so that they prevent spread of infection. Now, the first and second line of defense isn't always enough. So the third line of defense, something we call an immune response, which is actually unique to the animal kingdom, is going to be very specific. And this is this idea of immunity. Not only do they target specifically the pathogen that's infected you, but they can also remember that pathogen in case of a second exposure. And since they remember it, they're able to respond much more quickly and therefore get rid of the pathogen before it can cause too much damage, hopefully. So here we have some more vocabulary that's going to come up. So we talked about the pathogen. Well, on the surface of the pathogen, what your specific or your immune response is looking at is something called an antigen. And this is found on the surface of those pathogens, and it's usually some sort of self-surface protein. So many of our cells have proteins on the outside that identify them as self. So like your red blood cells, your blood type, those are antigens on the cell surface marker, so we can tell that blood belongs to you. Well, the same is on bacteria and viruses. They have these little markers on the outside, and that's what your body will look at and realize, like, oh, that doesn't belong here. One of the things that gets produced in this immune response by B cells, which are a special type of white blood cell, is something called an antibody, and this is a protein that will actually bind to the antigen and hold on to it until reinforcements in the form of macrophages arrive. So let's look at some of the steps of this immune response. So there's an infection. A pathogen gets by that first and second line of defense. At this point, a macrophage or some other phagocyte has come around and engulfed. We realize there's an infection. They've eaten up this pathogen, whatever it is. And now they're going to present it to something called a helper T cell. So essentially, they come over and tell them, look, this is what I found. We need some help fighting it. The helper T cell then does just that. It's a helper. It signals to B and killer T cells, alerting them that there's an infection and it's time for them to get ready to do their job. And it will show them the antigen and make them aware of exactly what it is that they're looking for. Now, B cells, these are the cells that make antibodies, and antibodies are highly specific. So once there's been an infection and that helper T cell starts to present the antigen, different B cells will come along and see if they can make an antibody that will fit just right to that antigen. Once they find one that matches up, then that B cell is going to start dividing and dividing and dividing. And so you have hundreds and hundreds of these B cells, all making antibodies specific to that antigen. We call some of those plasma cells, and these are going to be the ones that are active at the time of the infection. And they're going to travel through the blood and they're going to release thousands and thousands of these antibodies. Those antibodies will bind to the antigens and hold them together, making them an easy target for phagocytes and other white blood cells whose job it is to destroy them. Memory B cells are also made at the same time, and these guys just remember how to make that antibody. And so if ever there's a secondary infection, they don't have to go and try to figure out what antibody to make. They already know, they remember it, and they release it. And so a secondary infection, you can kill everything before it has an impact. Another type of cell is a killer T cell, and killer T cells are activated. And these guys, their job is to actually target and destroy infected cells so the infection can't spread. They target virus-infected cells, bacteria-infected cells, and oftentimes cancer cells. So there's actually some new treatments available where they will find T cells that target specific cancer cells and grow them up en masse and reintroduce them to patients to help their immune system fight the cancer. And so the killer T cells, their job is to take care of any infected cells and destroy them so the infection can't spread. You also make memory killer T cells, and again, this is so if there's a secondary infection, your body already knows what to do, already knows what signs to look for, and it can address the problem before you get too sick. So this is what we call active immunity. You actively are fighting an infection. So after a first infection, so if you get the flu this year, you're then immune to that particular strain of flu because your immune system has already fought it off. It already knows what works, and it has antibodies and killer T cells kind of waiting in the wings, those memory cells. And so if you're exposed again, your body's response time is much quicker, and so the pathogen doesn't get a chance to really get a hold and have a huge impact. You can respond before it can really dig in and start causing damage. Vaccines actually contain dead, weakened, or incomplete portions of pathogens or the antigens on the outside of their cell surface. And that sounds strange, but this way you can kind of alert your immune system and they get a practice run at it, so you have an immune response, but you're not really infected, so you're not really getting sick, but your immune system is able to build up its own immunity. So if you're ever exposed to that particular pathogen in real life, like a real live virus or bacteria, then your body already knows how to fight it off, and so it will kill it right away. And so that's how vaccines work. There's another type of immunity called passive immunity, and this, mainly we talk about it in terms of being transferred from mother to child, and it's temporary. It's kind of in the first few months of life, antibodies are actually transferred from the mother to the child through the placenta before the baby's born, and it also can be found in breast milk. Another way of getting this passive immunity is by injecting antibodies from another organism, and so some vaccines, they actually use this kind of passive immunity, and it tends to be temporary. It's useful for like snake venom bites. One of the ways that they deal with this is through passive immunity. And that's about it. So hopefully you learned something. Make sure you take notes. And if you have any questions, I want you to write them down now so you remember to ask them when you get to class. All right, bye.